There comes a moment in life when you realize that no one is coming to save you. Not your friends, not your family, not fate, only you. And that moment, though painful, is a blessing because it is the moment of awakening. It's when you understand that waiting for help is just another way of surrendering. As Carl Jung taught, the strength of a human being does not grow when others rescue him, but when he becomes weary of waiting, stops blaming the world, and begins to build with whatever he has, even if it seems small. Moving forward without help is not about pride, it's about freedom. It's about staring into the chaos, clenching your teeth and saying, I will do it anyway. Because when you learn to move without depending on anyone, you realize that strength was never missing, only decision. And once you decide, nothing and no one can stop you again. There was a point in my life when I understood something that changed me forever. No one was going to rescue me. No one was going to show up with the answers I needed, or the perfect advice, or the opportunity that would take me out of where I was. And accepting that hurt, because for so long I believed success depended on luck, connections, or someone opening the right door for me. But it wasn't that way. Life was waiting for me, not for anyone else. And when I finally understood that, I felt fear. Yes, but also a new kind of power, because for the first time I realized that if everything depended on me, then the power was in my hands too. Many people remain stuck, waiting for validation, waiting for someone to tell them they are ready, to confirm that they can. But while they wait, the days pass, and life does not wait. Life keeps moving, and only those who decide to move, even without guarantees, keep up with it. I lived through that. I spent years waiting for signs, for motivation, for the perfect moment, until one day I got tired. I got tired of waiting for someone else to believe in me. I got tired of justifying why I wasn't moving forward. I got tired of promising myself that someday I would start. And that day, without anything magical happening, I simply began. I acted without permission, without witnesses, without applause. I made mistakes, countless ones. But every failure gave me something I had never had before: confidence. Because when you do something without support and still survive, you discover that you were never as fragile as you thought. Solitude, far from weakening you, shapes you. It teaches you to trust your steps, even when you tremble. It gives you a clarity no book can teach, a strength that is born only when no one holds you and you decide not to fall. It's not about denying our need for others. We all need love, connection, and belonging. But there are stages in life where the path must be walked alone, where silence becomes the teacher, and independence becomes the test of character. If you don't learn to rise without help, you'll spend your life depending on someone else to lift you. And that's not love, that's dependency. It's not freedom, it's an emotional prison. True maturity isn't shouting, I don't need anyone, but being able to say, I can keep going even if I'm alone. For a long time, I too saw myself as a victim. I used to repeat phrases like, no one supports me, I have no luck, no one understands me. But in time, I realized those words were mental traps, elegant excuses to justify my lack of action. The world doesn't stop to explain why it didn't help you. It simply keeps moving. And if you don't move with it, you're left behind. That's why I'm telling you now, stop waiting for someone to push you. No one will. And that's okay, because the loneliness that hurts you today is the same one that will teach you to trust yourself. Your character is built when everything seems against you, and you still decide to continue. Your strength is revealed when you have no one left to call, but you still take one more step. And your freedom begins when you understand that life is not about finding help, but about becoming your own help. There is no greater lesson than that. Mistakes don't destroy you. They refine you. Every fall sharpens your judgment. Every failed attempt strengthens your will. Every step you take alone brings you closer to a version of yourself that no longer depends on anyone to move forward. That version, the one that doesn't seek permission, approval, or rescue, is the one that's truly alive. The world is full of people waiting for the perfect moment to begin, waiting to feel ready, waiting for fear to disappear, waiting for a sign, a push, an approval. But that moment never comes. No one will knock on your door to tell you you're ready. No one will carry the weight of your choices or the consequences of what you do or fail to do. And when you finally understand that, it hurts at first, but then it sets you free. Because if responsibility is yours, then power is too. That's where the change begins. When you stop waiting to be saved and decide to rise. When you understand that every step, even small, even clumsy, belongs to you. Moving forward alone doesn't mean doing everything right. It means continuing even when things go wrong. It means trusting your judgment, your intuition, and that quiet part of you that refuses to give up, even without guarantees. Every fall teaches you something. You learn to stumble with more awareness, to rise faster, to recognize when fear speaks louder than your purpose. And in that process, without realizing it, you begin to shape a stronger version of yourself. You no longer need anyone to hold you, because you've learned how to hold yourself. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally understood that no one else can walk your inner path for you. Yet there's something few people ever warn you about. The silence. That deep, unsettling silence that appears when there's no one to share your fears with. When applause fades, when validation disappears, when everything outside seems still, but inside, you're fighting the most important battle of your life. That silence is heavy, and if you don't learn to face it, it can become unbearable. But if you listen, if you embrace it, if you allow it to speak, it becomes your greatest teacher. Because within silence, your true voice begins to rise. The one that doesn't seek approval, that doesn't dress the truth to make it pretty, that tells you what you didn't want to hear but desperately needed to. It's in that confrontation where you begin to ask yourself, with brutal honesty, is what I'm doing really helping me grow? Am I moving out of conviction or out of fear of not being enough? Am I chasing my own dreams or the ones others placed in me? Those questions hurt, but they are sacred, because to move without direction isn't to move, it's to exhaust yourself. And when you finally stop to listen, you remember something you had forgotten, that you are not as fragile as you thought, that you can endure, adapt, and rebuild yourself without relying on anyone else's push. That kind of strength can't be taught, bought, or inherited. It's forged in solitude, in the days no one sees you, in the nights when you doubt everything, but still choose to keep going. There is where your inner steel is born, your clarity, your real power. Because when you learn to walk alone, you discover you were never truly alone. You only needed to hear yourself. Society has taught men to fear solitude, to believe that being alone will break them, that silence will consume them, that without company, they will lose their way. But solitude doesn't destroy anyone. What destroys is having no direction. What hurts is not being alone. but not knowing where to go. What drains you is not silence, but the endless attempt to please everyone, to fulfill expectations that aren't yours, to perform a life that doesn't nourish your soul. When you finally understand who you are and where you're going, solitude stops feeling like a burden and becomes a sacred space where everything finds its order again. Being alone ceases to be a punishment and becomes a privilege, because without noise, without interference, you can finally listen to yourself. You can recognize what you truly want and what you only learn to desire by habit. You don't need more voices. You need fewer distractions. You don't need more advice. You need more silence to uncover your own answers. When you understand silence, it stops being emptiness and becomes strength. Every day you advance without applause, you build character. Every decision made without seeking permission strengthens your independence. Every promise you keep to yourself sharpens your mind and makes your purpose unshakable. Those who rise are not born with privilege. They are shaped in hidden places, in heavy moments, where the only witness of their effort is their own consciousness. There, the soul is tempered. But moving forward alone is not just about resistance. It's also about courage. The courage to begin before you feel ready. Most people wait for the perfect moment, the ideal conditions, the flawless plan. But that moment never comes. There will always be fear, something missing, doubt whispering that you're not prepared. What changes destiny is not readiness, but the courage to move, despite uncertainty. Confidence doesn't appear before action. It's built through action. I spent years waiting to feel ready, polishing plans, perfecting details that were only fear disguised as preparation. Until one day, I understood. It wasn't lack of time, it was lack of decision. So I began with what I had, with fear, with confusion, with imperfection. But I began. And though I fell many times, each attempt gave me something more valuable than certainty. It gave me strength of spirit. Because confidence comes after the first step, never before. So if you're standing at that edge, not knowing where to begin, start anyway. Start trembling, start unsure, but start. Because action is the only force that breaks fear. And if you ever wonder whether it's worth it, remember this. Not moving out of fear of failure is also a form of failure. No one will give you guarantees. No one will applaud you at the beginning. But the reward comes the day you discover that everything you were searching for in others was always inside you. The strength, the clarity, the direction. And when you finally reach that point, you understand something powerful. You never needed help. You needed decision. One of the hardest truths of walking alone is realizing that not everyone will be happy to see you rise. It hurts to accept it, but it's real. Not everyone around you wants to see you evolve. Some will feel threatened by your growth, because your transformation will remind them of the change they still resist within themselves. Carl Jung taught that the journey of the self is not about escaping solitude, but about befriending it. Because only in the silence of your own soul can you meet the person you were always meant to become. When you begin to change, some people will leave without a word, and many will pretend to support you while secretly wishing you'd go back to who you used to be. It hurts because we expect those closest to us to celebrate our progress. Yet when transformation begins, Carl Jung would say that not everyone can bear to see a reflection of what they themselves are too afraid to become. Your growth, though silent, exposes their excuses. It mirrors their own stagnation and reminds them that they could do more, but they choose not to move. That is where life tests you. You are given two paths: shrink yourself to keep belonging, or stand tall, even if it leaves you alone. And though it hurts, solitude in progress is always more valuable than company in paralysis. There is nothing more dangerous than surrounding yourself with people who applaud you only as long as you remain harmless. Moving forward without help also means facing grief. The grief for your old self and for the relationships that could not survive your evolution. You learn that not everyone can walk beside you now, and that doesn't make you cruel. It makes you aware. You are not obligated to drag along anyone who refuses to move in the same direction. Your evolution doesn't need permission, only coherence. Losing people hurts, but it is also a purification. Every time someone leaves because you no longer fit their mold, life makes room for those who vibrate with your new self. People unafraid of your ambition, who don't ask you to dim your light, who push you forward and understand you without explanation. Accepting this brings freedom. Freedom to move on without guilt, to grow without seeking approval, to build without needing validation. Your path is not a vote. It needs no consensus, only decision. As long as you seek external validation, you'll walk with the brakes on. But when you let go of the need to please, progress becomes inevitable. And in that process, another lesson reveals itself. When you walk alone, your best ally is discipline. No one pushes you anymore. No one corrects or praises you. What sustains you is your ability to follow through, even when no one is watching. It's difficult at first. We're conditioned to act under pressure, to report, to seek applause. But when you take full responsibility for your own progress, you realize that without self-discipline, there is no freedom. Discipline becomes the invisible structure that keeps you grounded when exhaustion hits, when progress is unseen, when motivation fades. It's not about inspiration, it's about commitment. Doing what's right even when no one notices. It's keeping your word even when no one hears it. It's moving forward even when nothing seems to happen. I learned to work like that, in silence, without sharing my plans, without announcing my moves, guided only by my commitment and the day in front of me. It was uncomfortable at first, without recognition or immediate results, but it was there, in that emptiness, that I discovered what I was truly made of. Self-discipline is that inner voice that whispers, "Do it anyway," even when your mind searches for excuses. It's the muscle that saves you from chaos, the net that holds you when everything trembles. Most people think discipline is a prison, but Jung would remind us it's the opposite. It is pure freedom. The freedom of knowing you can trust yourself, that regardless of the environment, you'll follow through, that while others wait for inspiration, you're already advancing. And once you understand that, there's no turning back, because a person who governs themselves depends on no one else. Discipline is the bridge between intention and freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to not be a slave to your impulses. Being disciplined doesn't mean living chained. It means having enough control to not sabotage yourself, to not give up at the first discomfort. It's realizing that every day counts, even the ones that seem insignificant, even the ones that hurt. Because the truth is simple. There is no progress without structure. If no one pushes you, you must push yourself. If no one guides you, you must draw the path in the dark. If no one rescues you, you must learn to hold yourself with your own hands. That doesn't come from motivation. It comes from decision. A firm, unconditional decision to stay true to yourself. even when you're tired, even when results don't show, even when it feels like it's you against the world. That's the difference between those who advance and those who just wish. Ask yourself honestly, are you acting like someone who wants results or like someone who only seeks comfort? Because real growth doesn't happen on easy days. It happens when you wake up without energy and still show up, when you keep working even unseen, when you do what's right without expecting reward. That invisible consistency is what one day surprises you. You look back and realize that everything changed, not by luck, but by every single time you did what had to be done, even when you didn't want to. That is the discipline that transforms you, that gives you power, that grants true freedom. Yet moving forward alone isn't only about strength, it's about wisdom. Because when no one tells you what to do, you must learn to figure it out. And solving things alone is an art built from mistakes, frustration, and long nights of learning who you really are. You learn to fix what breaks in your home, to make difficult decisions without asking for advice, to calm yourself when everything seems to be burning down. You discover that life leaves you no other choice but to grow. I too depended on others for a long time, always waiting for someone to tell me what to do, how to decide, how to move, until I understood that if I truly wanted to move forward, I had to learn to think for myself, to read, to search, to try, to fail, to try again. And there I discovered something that changed everything. Every problem you face awakens a new part of you. Every obstacle trains you. Every mistake teaches you. Every failed attempt sharpens your mind. When you begin to solve things on your own, something changes in the way you walk. Your confidence no longer depends on everything going right. It depends on knowing that even when everything goes wrong, you will still find a way to fix it. And that makes you unstoppable. Because while many collapse at the first sign of difficulty, you learn to stay calm, to think, to act. You no longer need luck or rescue. You know that no matter what happens, you will move forward. And that, in a world full of people who give up too easily, makes you rare. Someone trustworthy, steady, someone who doesn't need to speak much because their presence alone radiates stability. That's why every time you face a problem and no one is there to help you, don't curse that moment. Be grateful. That's your training. That's the fire that shapes your character. The opportunity to grow without permission, without crutches, without fear. In the end, it's not the man with fewer problems who advances the most, but the one who faces them better, the one who doesn't drown in complaint, who adapts, who learns, who rises again and again until life itself surrenders to his determination. Because a person who knows how to solve things alone depends on no one to keep moving, and that kind of person always goes further. When you choose to move forward without depending on anyone, there comes a moment when the real battle stops being external. It's no longer against lack of resources or visible obstacles. It becomes an inner struggle, learning to hold yourself emotionally when everything is falling apart. Because no matter how much discipline you have or how clear your purpose is, there will always be heavy days. Days when you don't recognize yourself, when motivation disappears, and all that remains is exhaustion, doubt, and emptiness. And if on those days you don't have a strong emotional foundation, you break, not out of weakness, but because no one ever taught you how to build your own refuge. I had to learn it the hard way. I learned to stay silent when there was no one to talk to breathe when everything in me wanted to scream, to let the tears fall without shame. I discovered that emotional strength is not pretending everything is fine, but knowing how to hold yourself when it isn't. To be strong is not to stop feeling. It's to feel without being destroyed by it. It's allowing yourself to live sadness, anger, and frustration, but not surrendering to them. For emotions are not an enemy to defeat. They are a language to understand. And once you learn to read them, they stop being heavy. They become signals. They become guidance. Over time, I realized that what truly drains you is not physical effort, but everything unresolved inside. The anger you hide, the disappointment you pretend to overcome, the words you never said. All of that piles up and becomes weight. That's why I began creating my own rituals to empty my mind and cleanse my soul. Writing, training, walking alone, breathing with intention, sitting in silence. Not as a trend, but as a way to stay grounded when mental noise tried to consume me. And something inside me shifted. I stopped needing someone to calm me down. I stopped waiting to be understood before I could heal. I stopped asking to be rescued. I began to become my own foundation. And that emotional independence gave me a calm I had never known. I no longer reacted impulsively or drowned in my own drama. I began to act from serenity, not from the wound. It's not about becoming insensitive. It's about becoming solid. It's not about repressing what you feel, but managing it consciously, understanding that your emotions don't define who you are, but they do reveal where you are. If you learn to listen to them, they help you evolve. If you ignore them, they consume you. A person who learns to sustain themselves emotionally becomes unbreakable, not because they don't suffer, but because they know how to move through suffering without losing themselves in it. That is true freedom. To feel without letting your feelings decide for you. To be afraid and still move. To be sad and still show up. To be tired and not give up. Because in the end, strength is not in the muscles or the intellect, but in the heart that stays firm amid chaos. In the ability to tell yourself, yes, I'm exhausted, but I'm still here. When you reach that point, nothing external can control you. And that is the greatest freedom of all. The one that is born when you no longer need the world to hold you, because you learned to hold yourself. When you choose to walk alone, sooner or later, you realize you cannot afford to waste time or energy, because without direction, solitude becomes a labyrinth. There is nothing more dangerous than walking without a clear purpose, without an inner compass reminding you why you began. When no one is pushing you, focus becomes both your greatest ally and your hardest test. If you get distracted, if you drift, no one will correct you. No one will say, get back on track. It's you against your own distractions, your own habits, everything that tries to steal your clarity. I learned it the hard way. One day, I stopped to observe where my time was going and realized something uncomfortable. It wasn't a lack of opportunities holding me back. It was all the small things draining my attention. Meaningless conversations, endless scrolling, repetitive thoughts, and projects that didn't represent me. I was busy, but I wasn't evolving. I was moving, yet without direction. That kind of motion doesn't expand you, it consumes you. It drains you from the inside because it gives the illusion of progress while your soul remains still. And there comes a moment when you realize that no amount of movement matters if your inner compass is lost. Carl Jung once said that life begins only when you turn inward, when you confront your own unconscious. That was my turning point, when I understood that if I wanted to rise alone, I first had to protect my mind like a warrior defends sacred ground. I had to stop saying yes to everything and start saying no to almost everything. No to noise, no to distractions, no to the people who pull you even a few inches away from your purpose. Not because I thought I was better than anyone, but because I had chosen to honor my future more than my comfort. Growth is painful because it demands that you give up what once kept you safe. It hurts to close circles. It hurts to let go of people who bring you comfort, but not expansion. It hurts to silence the little pleasures that numb you but keep you from your purpose. It hurts to see others enjoying themselves while you work in silence. But that silence becomes the forge where your future self is created. That is the price of focus. And though it costs much, it always pays back in truth, strength, and clarity. I began to rebuild my days like one builds a temple, with intention. Sacred hours for what matters. Rituals that feed both body and soul. Routines that persist even when my emotions refuse to cooperate. I stopped improvising. I stopped living as if my life were accidental. I learned to treat time as the rarest form of gold. I learned to guard my attention as if it were divine light, because it is. Something fascinating happens when you start living with that kind of focus. The noise fades. The chaos settles. You stop needing motivation because clarity replaces it. You stop wasting energy deciding between 1,000 small things. You simply know what must be done, and you do it. You know where you're going, and you walk. The noise vanishes. The guilt dissolves. There's no excess, only direction. And in a world where everyone runs in circles, the one who walks with purpose becomes unstoppable. If you're at that stage where it feels like no one stands beside you, where everything depends on you, remember this. Your advantage is not support, it's focus. Support can vanish overnight, but clarity never does. When you know who you are and what you're building, walking alone doesn't make you weaker, it makes you unshakable. That kind of solitude isn't emptiness, it's the crucible where your true self is formed. When you decide to advance without help, precision becomes your new way of surviving. You can no longer move blindly. Every step matters. Every choice carries weight. Every distraction has a cost. So you evolve. You become intentional, meticulous, conscious. You start treating your energy like sacred currency. You filter what you see, what you hear, what you think. You start living deliberately, not reactively. You stop chasing. You begin creating. You stop running. You start walking with direction. And while most people are jumping from one thing to another, seeking validation, you stay grounded, sharpening your focus, protecting your purpose like a sacred flame. The world screams for attention, yet you choose silence. Everyone seeks company, but you seek clarity because you have understood that mastery doesn't come from doing more, but from doing better. And in that stillness, in that simplicity, you begin to feel something sacred awaken. Power. Not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that rules the self. The quiet, unshakable power that emerges when you conquer your impulses, your fears, and your need for approval. Discipline becomes your shield. Focus becomes your sword. And solitude becomes your greatest teacher. Carl Jung taught that the path toward individuation, the realization of the self, demands the death of all illusions. It requires that we face what we've been running from. And it's only when you embrace that solitude that your unconscious begins to speak. You start to see that what you once called loneliness was actually your soul calling you back home. Then, one day, without noticing, you realize the transformation. The things that once distracted you now seem irrelevant. The opinions that once shook you no longer touch you. The silence that once frightened you now feels like peace. You walk differently, slower, but with purpose. You look around, not seeking approval, but direction. You no longer chase validation. You emanate presence. Because you finally understand that independence is not about isolation. It's about wholeness. It's not about needing no one, but knowing that even if everyone leaves, you will still stand firm. That if the world goes silent, you can still hear your own voice. And in that realization, everything shifts. You see that walking alone was never a punishment. It was preparation. It was life's way of introducing you to your true self, the one that no applause, no title, no recognition could ever define. Because if you had been rescued, you would have never met your own strength. If your path had been cleared, you would have never built resilience. If someone else had carried you, you would have never known your depth. You are strong because you walked when your body trembled. You are wise because you failed without giving up. You are free because you stopped waiting for permission. That kind of freedom, that faith in yourself, is something no one can take away. So if you're standing at the edge, where everything feels uphill, where silence feels heavy and help never arrives, remember this: you are not alone. You are with yourself, and that is enough. Write it down. I can do it alone. Not to prove it to the world, but to remind yourself who you are. If these words have resonated with your journey, subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell, not just to follow another video, but to stay connected to ideas that awaken the deeper parts of your being. Because here, we don't speak of empty motivation. We speak of real transformation, of discipline, of purpose, of that sacred fire that keeps burning when no one else believes in you. Because in the end, you don't need to be saved. You only need to remember you are already your own rescue. Imagine this. You wake up as the first ray of light touches your face, but you don't feel anything. No gratitude, no excitement, no sense of purpose. There's just a weight on your chest that you can't explain. It's not sadness, and it's not despair. It's something much more elusive: emptiness. You get out of bed, get dressed, eat a tasteless breakfast on autopilot, and step outside to face a day you never really chose to live. You walk into a routine that wasn't built by you. You go to a job that you don't love, surrounded by people who don't truly know you, and everything appears normal. No one screams, no one cries, no one complains. And yet, something deeply silent is dying inside of you. What if that tiredness you feel every day isn't physical? What if it's not stress, not a lack of motivation, not even clinical depression? What if what's slowly draining your spirit is the fact that you're trapped in a life you never consciously chose? Carl Jung once wrote that the greatest danger of modern life is not external chaos, but internal conformity, the slow erosion of the self, the quiet surrender of the soul in exchange for approval, for superficial success, for the validation of a system that punishes individuality. How did we end up here? They told us that we would study, get a job, build a family, save money, and that would be the formula for a good life. But no one ever asked us if that was what we truly wanted. No one taught us to look inward. No one prepared us for the invisible cost of obedience. And now, millions of people walk through life like sleepwalkers, functional, polite, seemingly successful, but empty. Not tired because of what they do, but because of what they have stopped being. There's an invisible trap in our society, one that Jung saw with clarity. The modern individual has no soul, only a function. We are trained to perform, not to feel, to produce, not to question, to conform, not to be. But when was the last time you truly questioned your day-to-day life, your job, your relationships, your goals? Are they really yours? Or were they implanted by a culture that worships efficiency and mocks introspection? Think about it. How many decisions have you made from a place of authenticity? And how many were born from fear? Fear of disappointing others, of failing, of not fitting in. And in that silent fear, how much of yourself have you had to hide? This is not a kind of tiredness that a vacation can fix. It's not something a new business or a self-help book can solve. It's deeper than that. It's the silent scream of a soul begging for a life filled with meaning. It's the shadow of the life you've left behind in the name of doing what others said was right. Modern psychology tries to medicate this discomfort. It gives it clinical names, isolates its symptoms, and tells you it can be managed. But Jung knew something essential. The soul doesn't suffer without reason. Behind the exhaustion, behind the chronic boredom, behind the constant anxiety, there's a terrifying truth that most people don't want to face. The life you're living is not your own. And still, every morning, you repeat the same ritual. Because it's easier to stay asleep than to stare into the abyss of an unlived life. It's more comfortable to be part of the machinery than to stop and ask if that machinery is destroying you. But what if you dared to look beyond the fatigue? What would you discover if you began to undo the social programming that dictates who you're supposed to be? Are you willing to give up the false safety of an acceptable life to start living an authentic one? Because here's something no one ever told you. The soul always knows when it's in prison. And even if you can't hear it screaming, the silence is heavy. It consumes you. It drains you. Until one day, you may finally wake up, only to realize it's already too late. And it is precisely in that existential silence that the real journey begins. Because this is not just an emotional issue. It's a deep psychological phenomenon with philosophical roots that have been growing silently for centuries. And now, it's time to unearth those roots so that you can see what has always been there, waiting for you to confront it. The hidden problem and its psychological origins. There is a silent tragedy that plays out in millions of souls every day. It doesn't appear in medical textbooks. It can't be diagnosed in a 15-minute consultation. But it consumes life from within. The disconnection between who we are and the life we live. Carl Jung referred to it as alienation from the self, a deeply human phenomenon where the individual becomes so detached from their inner essence that they begin to live behind a mask that smiles, functions, interacts, and even succeeds, while deep within, the soul is crying out, unheard and unseen. This mask becomes so well rehearsed that even we start to believe it's who we really are. But beneath the surface, there's a silent agony, a sense of falseness, of not belonging in our own lives. How do we arrive at such a fractured state? It doesn't happen suddenly or dramatically. It begins in childhood, and not necessarily through acts of violence or overt neglect, but through something far more subtle and insidious: conditional love. We learn from a very young age that our worthiness, our value, and even our right to be loved is linked to our ability to obey, to please, to fit expectations. And so, bit by bit, we build a socially acceptable personality. We become what others want us to be. In doing so, we begin to amputate parts of ourselves that don't fit into that mold. We silence our sensitivity, hide our anger, ignore our intuition, dismiss our odd dreams, and suppress the questions that made adults uncomfortable. Every piece we deny, every trait we hide, is a surrender to survival in a world that rewards conformity over authenticity. And in the name of adaptation, we repress the very elements that make us whole. Jung issued a warning. What you deny submits you. What you accept transforms you. Yet modern society does not encourage acceptance. It promotes denial. It trains us to conceal our deeper truths, to disconnect from our rawness, our vulnerability, our instincts. We're taught to amputate parts of the soul in exchange for acceptance, success, and belonging. And with every internal compromise, we become more polished on the outside and more hollow within. This is not a new crisis. Thinkers before Jung saw the same spiritual fracture. Nietzsche called it the morality of the slave, a way of living rooted in obedience, fear, and the desperate need for external validation. Schopenhauer described it as the veil of illusion, a life caught in endless desire, never reaching true peace. Sartre called it bad faith, the self-deception of living a life that denies our radical freedom to choose who we are. But Jung went deeper. He realized that the root of the problem is not only cultural, but also deeply psychological. It lies in the collective unconscious, a vast inner landscape made of symbols, archetypes, and inherited psychological structures that shape us from within, long before we are aware of them. According to Jung, every soul carries a unique path, a journey called individuation. It is the sacred process of integrating all parts of the self, even those we were forced to reject, abandon, or hide. Yet the modern world has no space for this inner journey. Our educational systems do not teach introspection. Our work environments rarely reward authenticity, and our family systems, often unconsciously, repeat cycles of trauma under the guise of love. So, what do we do in the face of this absence? We adapt. We build efficient, productive, agreeable identities. We become what the world demands of us, and in doing so, we forget who we were before the world told us who we needed to be. This is the deep root of the exhaustion you feel. It is not physical fatigue. It is a hunger of the soul, a tension between the life you are living and the life your soul came here to experience, a dissonance between your outer performance and your inner truth. And the most tragic irony, many people try to cure this spiritual emptiness with even more effort. They chase goals, start routines, follow diets, rearrange their lives, believing that if they just improve enough, that emptiness will vanish. But the soul cannot be nourished by achievements. You cannot heal the wounded parts of your spirit with productivity. The shadow that lives within you, the parts of yourself you denied, shamed, and exiled, does not disappear because your to-do list is complete. No external accomplishment can fill an internal void. The only path forward is inward, to pause, to listen, to feel the things you've numbed, to reclaim the pieces of yourself you once disowned, to move beyond the mask and remember the face underneath. The truth is, your soul has never stopped calling. It's been whispering through your anxiety, your discontent, your restlessness, not as punishment, but as a guide, because your real self is not lost. It's buried under layers of expectation, fear, and forgotten dreams, and all it wants is to come home. But you cannot fill a hole in the soul with accomplishments. You cannot silence the shadow with productivity. Carl Jung taught that the shadow is not evil itself, but rather the suppressed, the parts of ourselves we exile. What you hide does not vanish. It transforms into exhaustion, anxiety, and self-sabotage. It becomes that quiet inner voice whispering, "This makes no sense," the one you've trained yourself to ignore. And then one day, you feel drained. You look in the mirror and no longer recognize the eyes staring back. You are still breathing, but you're no longer living. You function like a cog in a machine you don't understand, one you don't know how to escape. Jung echoed what Viktor Frankl also understood. When meaning is absent, we become addicted to distraction. Pleasure, power, or validation become substitutes. That explains much of today's behavior: the compulsive use of social media, the fear of solitude, the constant comparison, the obsession with becoming someone in the eyes of others. Beneath it all lies the same root. We have lost contact with the soul. Jung said, the soul doesn't scream. It whispers, and if you ignore its voice, it will slowly drain you from within. That is the deeper issue. You are not tired because of what you do. You are tired because of what you are suppressing while doing it. You have been conditioned to serve the system, not yourself. And unless that truth is confronted, the inner void will only expand. Nothing outside of you can ever fill it. Now that you've glimpsed the hidden roots of your fatigue, a more urgent question emerges. What is this emptiness doing to you without you realizing it? Because its effects are not just felt, they ripple into how you love, how you work, how you quietly abandon your own dreams. In the next moments, you'll see how this invisible wound is shaping every part of your life without your awareness. Its invisible consequences. You don't see it. It has no color or shape, but it is there, in your tone of voice, in how you connect with others, in what you dream, or more precisely, in what you no longer dare to dream. When you're trapped in a life you never chose, every part of you adapts to the prison. Your language becomes dull. Your emotions become numb. The light in your eyes dims. And most dangerous of all, you stop thinking for yourself. You begin to echo truths you never questioned, defend beliefs you never truly felt, pursue goals that were never yours. But this doesn't happen overnight. The soul does not surrender in a single moment. It retreats quietly, in layers, like an animal that slowly learns resistance is futile. First, you let go of small desires. Then, you silence your discomfort. Later, you justify your apathy, until one day, weariness feels normal, and resignation starts to look like virtue. Carl Jung warned that the greatest threat to the human psyche is not open trauma, but the slow, quiet detachment from its own center. When you no longer know what you want, when you no longer know who you are, when you live without desire, without fire, without questions. This is not maturity. It is surrender. And surrender has real consequences. First, you lose your sense of time. When you start living a life that isn't truly yours, the days begin to blur. One day fades into the next, and suddenly it's impossible to distinguish between Monday and Wednesday. Even weekends lose their meaning. Saturday, once a symbol of rest or joy, becomes just another slot in your calendar. Life turns into a repetitive cycle of tasks, obligations, and routines, devoid of emotional memory. Time no longer feels like something you experience. It becomes a conveyor belt you're forced to ride. You wake up, go through the motions, and go to bed, all while wondering if anything truly happened. You're alive, technically, but not really living. Second, your self-image becomes distorted. The person you once were, the vibrant, curious feeling self, starts to disappear behind layers of masks and expectations. You begin to question who you are, but not in a deep, philosophical way. It's a more disorienting, empty kind of doubt. You wonder if you're an introvert or just exhausted from pretending. You can't tell if you've stopped loving or if you've simply forgotten how to receive love in your current emotional state. Your talents, once so clear, now seem distant or delusional. Your boundaries blur. Your self-worth crumbles. You can't recognize the person in the mirror, not because they've changed, but because you've drifted so far from yourself that even your own reflection feels like a stranger. Third, you start connecting with others from a place of lack. When your soul feels fractured, you instinctively reach outside of yourself, desperately seeking what you've lost within. You search for validation, for direction, for a sense of purpose, but not because others owe it to you. It's because you've forgotten how to find it within yourself. And that's where relationships begin to suffer. Bonds born from emptiness are fragile. They are rooted in need, not connection. This is how codependency starts. Toxic dynamics emerge. Desperate attachments form, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being alone, of being unseen, of being unloved. You cling, not because you care too much, but because you no longer know what it feels like to be whole on your own. Fourth, you begin to escape constantly into food, into endless scrolling, into porn, into meaningless entertainment, into impulsive shopping, into anything that numbs the silence within. Not because you're lazy or weak, but because the pain of being disconnected from your true self is unbearable. Neuroscience supports this. When we live in dissonance, when our outer actions contradict our inner desires, the brain enters a state of chronic stress. Survival circuits kick in. Cortisol levels rise. Natural dopamine production drops. You end up walking through life in a state of constant alertness, even though there's no visible threat. You're tired, irritated, indifferent. But you don't understand why. You just know that something inside feels wrong, broken. Society calls this adulthood. But Carl Jung had another name for it. Disindividuation, the reverse of soul growth. It's the unraveling of who you are meant to be. And here lies the cruelest irony. The more successful you become by society's standards, the more you risk betraying yourself. The more functional you appear, the more disconnected you might actually be. The more praise you receive, the deeper your truth might be buried under layers of conformity and performance. And so, the emptiness grows, not from failure, but from succeeding at things that don't align with your essence. This existential void doesn't only show up in big life decisions. It creeps into the small ones too. You accept jobs that drain you. You maintain friendships that deplete you. You repeat habits that quietly destroy you. You say yes when everything in your body screams no. And the worst part? You justify it all with words like maturity, realism, responsibility. You convince yourself this is what it means to be an adult. But deep down, beneath all the logic and defense mechanisms, you know something's off. You know you weren't born to be a shadow of your true self. You know that another kind of life is possible, but that it's a path that won't reveal itself through conformity or comfort. Psychiatrist Gabor Mate, in his work on trauma, explains something profoundly important. When a person has to choose between authenticity and belonging, they will almost always choose belonging. Why? Because being rejected for who you are is more painful than pretending to be someone else. And so, from a young age, we learn to betray our authenticity to avoid the terror of abandonment. But this survival mechanism comes with a cost. You become a more palatable version of yourself, a version that's acceptable, tolerable, normal. And after a while, you forget what it ever felt like to be truly yourself. And now, here we are, an entire generation that is confused, anxious, high-performing, yet empty. People who've done everything right, but still feel like something's missing. People who've followed the script: education, job, relationships, success, only to arrive at a place that feels hollow. And the consequences aren't waiting somewhere in the future. They are already here, showing up in your thoughts, your emotions, your choices, your restlessness, your fatigue. They are woven into the way you exist, right now. If you don't change the internal landscape, it won't matter how many times you switch careers, how many relationships you end, how many countries you move to. You will carry the same feeling wherever you go. Because the real prison isn't outside of you, it's inside. And escape doesn't come from rearranging the external. It comes from a deeper, quieter form of revolution. But this isn't where the story ends. There is a way out. There is a silent rebellion, one that doesn't begin with rage or destruction, but with a question. A brave, unfiltered, soul-shaking question. What would happen if I stopped being who the world expects and started being who I truly am? This is where transformation begins, not with quitting your job or walking away from everything. That's just another form of avoidance. Real rebellion doesn't require you to burn your life down. It requires you to wake up within it. It asks you to sit with the discomfort instead of escaping it, to be honest instead of agreeable, to choose yourself, moment by moment, even when the world wants someone else. And it all begins with a single question, one that pierces through years of conditioning, performance, and silence. What if everything I've ever called me isn't really me at all? Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, the journey toward your true self, is neither comfortable, nor linear, nor socially endorsed. It's more like a descent into the underworld, where you're forced to confront everything you've denied, repressed, forgotten, your shadow, your real desire, your rawest truth. It's the hero's path, not of playing a role, but of daring to write one's own story. And where does it begin? Not with answers, but with brutal honesty, with a pause, with the kind of silence that lets you hear that voice you've been avoiding for years. Yes, that one. The voice that visits you at dawn when sleep won't come. The one that whispers when you look into the mirror and no longer recognize yourself. The voice that quietly asks, is this it? Is this really the life you came here to live? Jung taught that every deep transformation begins when the urge to be yourself becomes stronger than the fear of not belonging. When the pain of falsehood outweighs the risk of being real. And this is where most people falter. They want transformation without confrontation, healing without discomfort, evolution without loss. But no true self can be built on a false foundation. The first act of rebellion, then, is to feel, fully, to allow the void to ache, the anxiety to speak, the sadness to scream, without numbing yourself with distractions. Because behind every emotion you fear lies the version of you that you've forgotten. The second act is to question without fear. What would I do if I didn't need to please anyone? What choices have I made from fear and which from true desire? What part of myself am I still hiding to be loved? These questions don't come with quick answers, but each one cracks the walls of the prison. Each one melts the mask a little more. Then comes the hardest part, acting differently. Even if your voice trembles, even if detachment hurts, even if the world doesn't understand. Maybe you say no for the first time to something you always accepted. Maybe you choose art over money. Maybe you allow yourself to cry in front of someone. Or maybe you just stare at your reflection and admit, I don't know who I am, but I'm ready to find out. That is freedom. Not a life without rules, but one with rules that are your own. A life where every step, every relationship, every decision is aligned with your inner truth. And yes, it will hurt. You'll lose things, people, whole chapters of your life that no longer resonate. But you'll gain something priceless, yourself. Carl Jung echoed Nietzsche in saying that he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But your why can't be borrowed. It can't be inherited, taught, or approved by others. It must rise from within you like a flame no one can extinguish. And that flame, even if small, is enough to light your path. Becoming yourself is not becoming someone new. It's remembering who you were before the world told you who you should be. It's reclaiming your voice, your desire, your sacred madness for a life with meaning. And when you start walking that path, something shifts. You no longer need endless distractions. You stop measuring yourself by achievements. You don't beg for validation like a starving child. You begin to live with purpose, not because you have all the answers, but because you're finally asking the right questions. And then the unexpected happens. Fatigue turns into energy, anxiety into clarity, confusion into direction. Why? Because you're no longer betraying yourself, because for the first time, you're truly on your own side. But there's still one thing left, a realization so deep, so essential, it can rewrite your entire story. It's not a tip or a technique. It's a truth that changes how you see life, suffering, and your role in this world. In the next and final part, we will reveal it, the supreme truth, the final realization. What if suffering wasn't a mistake, but a message? What if every piece of anguish, every sleepless night, every silent sigh was trying to tell you something you've long forgotten? The deepest truth Carl Jung ever uncovered isn't only found in his theories, or even his books. In this life you lead, it's not about running away from pain or avoiding discomfort. Rather, it is about facing it head-on, about dedicating yourself to unraveling the mysteries that lie within your suffering. What you discover in that process is both beautifully simple and profoundly terrifying. The clarity you seek, true clarity, can only come when you dare to look deep inside your own heart. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." This awakening is precisely what you have been avoiding or postponing. For so long, you believed your exhaustion stemmed from external sources, the pressures of work, the relentless demands of life, the shadows of your past, the overwhelming stress that seems to follow you everywhere. But now, finally, you see it for what it is. That exhaustion isn't physical, it is spiritual. It is the weight of living out of alignment with the deepest needs of your soul. Your body may show signs of wear and tear, but it is your soul that is truly weary, ignored, silenced, and disconnected from the purpose it longs to fulfill. And your mind, fractured and scattered, loses its way when it loses sight of why you are here in the first place. The modern world has conditioned you to look outside yourself for everything, for love, for meaning, for validation, for peace. It has turned you into a seeker, a consumer endlessly chasing solutions in the external world, quick fixes, distractions, temporary comforts, when in truth, All of these things were meant to be found within you. You have always been the creator of your own answers, the originator of your own truth. Yet, you forgot this fundamental fact. Here lies the ultimate truth. Your soul was never meant to fit neatly into a box, to conform, to simply function like a cog in a machine. It came here to expand, to grow, to be fully alive in all its messy, beautiful complexity. Every time you denied this truth, every time you tried to squeeze yourself into roles or expectations that felt unnatural, you broke a little more. But the good news is that the path back is not out there somewhere. It is already inside you. Remember who you were before fear took hold, before duty and shoulds dictated your life. You are not your job. You are not your past trauma. You are not your successes or your failures. You are the consciousness that quietly watches all of it unfold. You are the soft voice that whispers truth in the silence, the spark that refuses to go out even when darkness feels all-encompassing. That spark, that indestructible core, which Jung called the self, is exactly what you came here to manifest. You were never meant to simply survive. You came here to individuate, to slowly become the whole, complete expression of who you truly are. Light and shadow, chaos and order, instinct and soul, all parts of one magnificent being. When you finally embrace this wholeness, the internal battles cease. The exhaustion that once consumed you begins to fade because you are no longer pretending to be someone you're not. Anxiety loosens its grip because you've stopped running in endless circles. What once felt like emptiness reveals itself as sacred space. What you once interpreted as pain now shows up as guidance, a teacher helping you navigate your path. The chaos that seemed unbearable becomes the very ground upon which you rebuild yourself, stronger and wiser. And in this moment, everything makes sense. Every misstep, every dark night of the soul, every moment of doubt, all of it was leading you here, to this exact understanding. You are not broken. You are remembering. You are not lost. You are waking up. And when this awakening takes place, when you stop running from yourself and start truly inhabiting your being, the world around you changes too. Not because the world itself has transformed, but because you are no longer the same person looking at it. This is the ultimate realization. The freedom, the peace, the sense of belonging you have been seeking in the outside world has always been inside you. It was never lost. It was just buried beneath layers of fear and conditioning. So breathe. You don't need to fix everything today. You don't need to accomplish it all at once. You only need to come back to yourself, to feel what you have been avoiding, to face what you have silenced, and to be what you have hidden away. This is your revolution. This is your act of love. This is your true homecoming. You are not tired. You are simply coming home. If you've made it this far, it's no coincidence. Something is stirring within you, an awakening that perhaps you hadn't fully recognized before. It means that a part of your inner self is beginning to change, to grow, and to seek something greater, something that transcends the daily grind. This moment you're experiencing is a sign, a nudge from your own consciousness, telling you that you're ready to explore new perspectives, question old beliefs, and open the door to transformation. I invite you to take a moment and share in the comments which part of this message moved you the most. Your reflections are not only valuable to you, but can also become a beacon of light for those walking a similar path. Sometimes, when we express what resonates with us, we create a ripple of inspiration that can reach souls far beyond our imagination. Your words could be just what someone else needs to hear right now, a source of encouragement, a spark of hope, or simply the reassurance that they are not alone. If this message has resonated with you, if it has made you reflect, please consider supporting this channel in whatever way feels right for you. Whether it's by clicking the subscribe button, activating the notification bell, or simply participating and sharing, your energy and participation are the fuel that keeps this content flowing. Every little bit of support helps these ideas and reflections reach more hearts and minds, reaching those who need them most. The energy you contribute here is more powerful than you know. It helps maintain a space where consciousness can grow, where deeper understanding can flourish, and where the seeds of change can be planted. By being part of this community, you become a common thread that unites those seeking meaning, growth, and transformation. So thank you, not only for watching and listening, but for being here, for being open, and for being willing to embark on this journey of awakening alongside others. Your presence matters, and together we can continue to build a space where truth, inspiration, and healing continue to spread. There is a silent enemy that lives within you. It doesn't sleep, it doesn't rest, and it shows up precisely when you're at your most vulnerable. It doesn't scream, it doesn't strike with physical force, but it can quietly destroy you from the inside out. This enemy is made of your own negative thoughts, and if you don't learn to master them, they will master you. Carl Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human soul, understood that hell is not a fiery pit beneath the ground. It's the storm that rages inside our minds. Imagine for a moment that every negative thought is a seed. If you don't act, that seed will grow. It will take root deep in your inner world. It will spread, and it will take over your inner garden. What once was fertile ground for love, peace, creativity, and connection slowly turns into a dark jungle filled with fear, guilt, doubt, and self-loathing. Have you ever been sitting in silence, not doing anything, when your mind suddenly starts replaying all the times you failed, all the mistakes you've made, all the times you heard, "You're not enough"? Have you ever felt like, even when everything looks fine on the outside, something inside is quietly tearing you down? That's the untrained mind at work. That's the shadow Jung spoke about. Carl Jung wouldn't simply tell you, just think positive, and everything will work out. He understood that the human mind is far too intricate for shallow advice. Instead, Jung would invite you to face your shadow, to get to know yourself, to watch your thoughts without judgment, but never to give them power. Because what you deny has the power to control you, but what you accept, you can begin to transform. Your mind is not your enemy. It is a tool. But if you let it become the master of your inner home, you become a prisoner inside your own house. Most people believe their thoughts are absolute truths, but they're not. They're just interpretations, learned patterns, echoes of words someone else spoke into your life, inherited fears passed down through generations. They are not your essence. They are not your soul. If today you feel like you're worthless, like you'll never make it, like the future is a blank page, it's not because that's true. It's because your mind has grown used to repeating that same destructive story like an old radio no one ever thought to turn off. And do you know what's truly heartbreaking? That many people get used to living this way. They become friends with suffering because it's the only thing they've ever known. But it's not your fault. We are never taught how to think. We're taught how to memorize, how to obey, how to repeat. but never how to explore the landscape of our inner world. Today could be the day that changes everything. But you need courage, because destroying negative thoughts doesn't happen with cute affirmations or momentary motivation. It takes inner work. It takes awareness. It takes a commitment to yourself. And here's the first step. Observe yourself. Don't identify with every thought that pops into your head. Every time a negative idea appears, look at it as if it were a cloud drifting by in the sky. You are not the cloud. You are the sky. Thoughts come and go. You decide whether they pass or whether you get caught in the storm. Try it now. Take a deep breath and bring to mind the negative thought that has haunted you the most recently. The one that creeps in at night when you're alone. Got it? Now step back and look at it from the outside. Who told you that? Is that truly yours? What if you stopped believing it? That thought you keep repeating. Maybe it once served you. Maybe it protected you from pain, from risk, from disappointment. But you don't need it anymore. You're evolving. You're waking up. You're reclaiming control. If this message is striking a chord within you, don't ignore it. There's a reason you're hearing this right now. Maybe your soul is ready to awaken. Maybe you're tired of being trapped inside your own mind. Maybe today is the first day of the rest of your life. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What does that mean? It means that unless you learn to see and shift the patterns inside your mind, you'll keep attracting the same stories over and over again, the same toxic relationships, the same failures, the same emptiness. Your mind is like a lens, and if that lens is fogged up with limiting beliefs, fear, and self-hate, then everything you see will appear distorted. It won't matter how much love you receive. If your mind insists you don't deserve it, you won't feel it. It won't matter how many doors open. If your mind says you're not capable, you'll walk away from them. That's why the first real power you must reclaim is the power of conscious attention. What are you feeding every day? Where is your energy going? Toward your doubts or toward your potential? Toward your shadow or toward your light? This is not about pretending everything is fine. Jung never taught denial. He would guide you to face your inner monster directly, to say to it, "I see you. I know you're there, but you're no longer running my life." Because negative thoughts thrive in silence, in neglect, in ignorance. But they lose their power the moment you expose them to the light of awareness. It's not enough to simply stop thinking negatively. That's just the beginning. You must re-educate your mind, just as a dedicated gardener tends to his soil. Imagine this. A gardener doesn't just pull out weeds and leave the ground bare. If he does, the weeds will return, often stronger than before. The earth abhors a vacuum, and your mind, like that soil, will not remain empty for long. If you do not consciously plant new seeds, new beliefs, new visions, new affirmations, the old patterns will inevitably grow back. But if you choose to plant thoughts of hope, of strength, of renewal, and you tend to them daily, these will be the ones to bloom. There is a simple yet profound practice that can change the landscape of your mind. Each morning, before the noise of the world floods your senses, before the emails, the messages, the news, the demands, pause, just for a few minutes. Take a pen, a notebook, and write down 3 affirmations, but not empty phrases, not cliches. Write words that stir something within you, that challenge your current identity, that remind you of who you're becoming. Words that feel like a mirror reflecting your highest self. For example, "I am capable of building a life rooted in peace. Or, I am not my thoughts, I am the one who observes them. Or perhaps, I deserve to heal, to grow, and to live fully. These are not magic spells, but they are tools, seeds, and what you water, grows. The point isn't to change your entire life in one dramatic act, but to reprogram your inner world, day by day. That's where the transformation lies, in consistency, not intensity. Carl Jung spoke of the archetype of the inner warrior, not the kind of warrior who fights to dominate others, but the one who fights for his own soul. The warrior who doesn't flee from pain, who doesn't crumble in the face of darkness. The one who steps into the fire and becomes his own healer. That warrior is already inside you, waiting. And each time you refuse to surrender to the voice that tells you you're not enough, each time you look in the mirror and choose belief over fear, you awaken him. You remember your strength. Do you know what terrifies a negative mind the most? The moment you begin to believe in yourself. The moment you stop being passive and start standing with purpose. The moment you open your eyes, even in pain, and say to yourself, today I may feel broken, but I will keep going. That moment signals something extraordinary. You're no longer a prisoner of your thoughts. You are the author of your life. You don't need everything in your life to be perfect in order to start changing how you think. In fact, it's because things are messy, uncertain, or painful that your choice to change carries even more power. Chaos is not the enemy. It's the raw material from which transformation is born. And when you feel like you can't go on, when the weight is too much, remember this: you are not alone. Every single person you admire, every soul that shines, every strong heart you see, has fought silent battles you'll never know. We all face shadows. We all encounter dark thoughts, but only some choose not to surrender to them. Only some choose to become alchemists, turning pain into wisdom, fear into courage. And today, you can be one of them. Not because you're completely ready, not because you have it all figured out, but simply because you're choosing to stop waiting, choosing to act, to feel, to face. Killing your negative thoughts does not mean erasing every painful memory. It means transmuting them. It means looking at them not with fear, but with curiosity. It means no longer running from the things that haunt you, but sitting with them and asking them what they came to teach you. Jung once said, "Gold is found where you least want to look." And it's true. Your power, your deepest potential, is hidden in the very places you've avoided for years. The wound you refuse to face, the memory you keep suppressing, the truth you silence when you're alone, that's where the treasure lies. That's where your evolution begins. How many times have you tried to distract yourself from what you truly feel? How many times have you silenced your sadness with noise, scrolling, partying, working endlessly, seeking validation in people who only help you forget for a while? But avoidance doesn't cure pain. It buries it. And what is buried grows in the dark. Negative thoughts are not defeated by distraction. They are healed through understanding. Start asking yourself, what is this dark thought trying to tell me? What wound is still bleeding that causes me to think this way? Because behind every self-destructive belief, there's an unheard pain, a wounded child, a memory that wasn't honored, a fear that was never faced. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what happens when you don't examine your mind. You end up living the same story over and over again, attracting the same kind of people, falling into the same patterns, feeling stuck, but not knowing why, because you're trapped in a prison built by your own unexamined thoughts. But the moment you become aware, truly aware, you unlock the possibility of choice. And in that choice lies your freedom. One of the most important steps in this journey is self-compassion. No, this is not about playing the victim. It's not about excusing everything or avoiding responsibility. It's about choosing to stop being your own worst enemy. It's about recognizing that you are a human being in the process of becoming. That you have made mistakes, yes, but you are not your mistakes. That you have been hurt, but you are not the pain. And that healing is not linear. It's messy and it's human. Ask yourself this: would you ever speak to someone you love the way you speak to yourself? Would you look them in the eyes and tell them they're clumsy, useless, or incapable? If not, why do you allow those same thoughts to echo inside you without resistance? You see, when you begin to cultivate self-compassion, something fundamental changes. Your inner dialogue stops being a battlefield and becomes a place of understanding. You begin to treat yourself with the same respect, care, and forgiveness that you so freely give to others. You start walking beside yourself, even in moments of failure, and that, as small as it might seem, is nothing short of revolutionary. Right now, I want you to become aware of that inner voice, the one that shows up when you make a mistake, fall short of your expectations, or compare yourself to someone else. That voice either builds you or breaks you. And if it breaks you, know this: it's not truly your voice. It's a leftover echo from the past. And the beautiful truth is, you have the power to change it. So, the next time your mind whispers, "I can't," respond with, "I'm learning." When it says, "I'm worthless," counter with, "I'm evolving. Each day I grow." This is not about lying to yourself. It's about choosing a story that allows growth instead of collapse. What you repeatedly tell yourself becomes your reality. That's not just a poetic idea. It's neuroscience. If you spend every day nurturing thoughts that harm you, don't be surprised if you find yourself living in pain. But if you dare to plant new thoughts, seeds of worthiness, of healing, of transformation, your external world will slowly begin to mirror your internal evolution. It's like cleaning a neglected room. At first, it's messy, chaotic, overwhelming. You can't just shut the door and hope it fixes itself. You must walk in, stir up the dust, move things around, throw out what no longer serves. And yes, in the beginning, it might look worse. But that mess is part of the healing. Slowly, the space clears, order returns, and light starts to shine through. The mind works the same way. Bringing the unconscious into consciousness is uncomfortable, even painful. But it's a sacred kind of pain, the kind that precedes healing. And make no mistake, this isn't a path for those seeking comfort. It's a path for those who are ready to transform, for those who understand there's more to life than repeating the same cycle of suffering. It's a path for those like you, who have felt the weight of their own thoughts, but have also heard the whisper calling them to awaken. Carl Jung spoke profoundly about the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves that holds everything we don't want to acknowledge: fear, guilt, rage, jealousy, shame, unresolved wounds. And it's from this very shadow that most of our negative thoughts are born. Why? Because what you deny doesn't disappear. It hides. And from the shadows, it controls you. If you don't face your anger, it will show up as passive aggression. If you don't acknowledge your fear, it will manifest as chronic anxiety. If you don't heal your guilt, It will become an inner critic that punishes you daily. Your shadow isn't your enemy. It's a forgotten part of you screaming to be seen. Negative thoughts are often just its way of asking for your attention. Healing those thoughts doesn't mean silencing them or pushing them away. It means listening to them, understanding their origin, and consciously choosing your response. A negative thought only holds power when you believe it's true. But if you begin to see it as an old script, a reflection of a version of you that no longer exists, it loses its grip. It stops defining you. It stops running the show. And this is where another essential principle comes in. Energy follows attention. Whatever you focus on grows. If you spend your day thinking about what's missing, what you did wrong, what you're afraid of losing, your mind will amplify that reality. But if you choose to focus on what you can build, on what is within your power, something profound shifts inside you. And once it shifts, it never goes back. Jung also saw the symbol of the circle as the representation of the soul's quest for wholeness. Do you know what that means? That every thought, every emotion, every shadow, and even every mistake plays a role in your journey. You didn't come into this world to be flawless. You came here to integrate your pieces, to discover your essence, to remember your light, even while walking through the dark. True awakening happens when you stop seeing your thoughts as enemies and start seeing them as messages, clues pointing to the places that need healing, the patterns you need to break, the truths you need to face. But to do that, you need inner space. And that's the problem. We live in a world filled with noise, opinions, social media, constant stimulation. The noise never stops. But transformation doesn't happen in the noise. It happens in the silence, in that sacred personal space where you can finally hear your own voice without interference. That's why one of the most powerful practices you can begin today is meditation. You don't need a mountaintop. You don't need to clear your mind. You just need a few minutes each day to breathe, to close your eyes, and to watch. Watch without reacting. Watch without judgment. This simple act, practiced with consistency, begins to dissolve negative thoughts, not by fighting them, but by recognizing that you are not them. You are the awareness that holds them. You are the space. And from that space, you get to choose. If you've never tried it, begin today. Just 5 minutes. Sit, breathe, observe. That's all it takes to begin rewriting the narrative inside your mind. And once you do, nothing will ever be the same. If your mind wanders, that's okay. Just return. Over and over again. Return. If a dark thought arises, don't push it away. Don't fight it. Observe it. Gently. Let it pass like a cloud across the sky. That is the essence of the inner warrior's practice. The inner warrior does not escape from the mind, nor does he surrender to it. He stands firm. He trains it, transforms it, and ultimately makes it an ally rather than a master. And if you've made it this far, it means something inside of you is already awakening. You are ready to begin the slow, courageous journey of freeing your mind from the grip of negativity. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to fix everything today. All you need is the willingness to take the next step. Most people don't realize this simple truth. Their negative thoughts are not who they are. They are not facts. They are learned programs, mental habits picked up unconsciously through years of conditioning. From early childhood, we absorbed ideas, judgments, fears, not ours, but from others. And without even knowing it, we began to carry the weight of someone else's pain. Maybe it was a father who screamed at you and told you that you'd never be good enough. Maybe it was a mother who made you feel selfish for wanting something for yourself. Perhaps a partner told you no one else could ever love you, or a teacher mocked you in front of your classmates and planted the seed of shame. Those voices were never truly yours, but you believed them. You gave them power. You repeated them in your head until they became part of your identity. And now they still echo in your mind, not because they are true, but because you never stopped to question them. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He knew that the human soul doesn't heal by forgetting. It heals by facing what was buried. You must confront those voices, not with anger, but with clarity. You must look at those thoughts and say, "This is not my voice. This is the voice of pain that was imposed on me. But I no longer choose to speak in the language of my wounds." Today, choose to speak to yourself with kindness, with dignity, with power. You may not be able to stop the first thought that arises. That thought might come from old conditioning, but you can choose the second thought. And that choice changes everything. That's where your freedom begins. That's where your real power lives. If you truly want to dissolve the power of your negative thoughts, you must make a radical decision. Stop repeating the stories that limit you. Stop saying, "That's just how I am," or "Nothing ever works out for me," or "I'll never get what I want." Every time you speak like that, you reinforce your own prison. You keep yourself locked in patterns that no longer serve you. But here's the truth. You can break that cycle. It starts by changing your internal dialogue. Even if the new words feel unfamiliar or artificial at first, speak them anyway. You once learned how to think poorly of yourself. That was a skill, learned through repetition. And the good news is, you can also learn to think from a place of truth, of compassion, of possibility. Carl Jung once said that the most terrifying experience for a human being is to accept themselves completely, but also that it's the most liberating. Because once you truly accept who you are, you no longer crave external validation. You no longer need the approval of others to feel worthy. You no longer chase an illusion of perfection that was never real to begin with. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It means recognition. It means looking at yourself honestly and saying, "This is where I am today, and from here, I will grow, I will evolve, I will heal." There's something else you need to understand. Negative thoughts don't disappear overnight. Some of them will return. Some will wear new disguises. But you'll know them now. You'll recognize their shape, their tone, their trick. And that recognition is powerful. Because once you see the trap, you no longer fall into it. Awareness is always the first step to transformation. And if you find yourself falling again, if those dark voices come back louder than before, don't judge yourself. Don't think you've failed. Remember, this is part of the journey. Every warrior stumbles. Every soul has its seasons of darkness. What matters most is not that you never fall, but that each time you rise, you do so with more clarity and strength. Now hear this clearly. You are not broken. You never were. You were confused. You were wounded. You were asleep. But your essence, what you are at your deepest core, has always remained untouched. No thought can destroy your soul. What you are waiting for is not outside of you. Your true self has been waiting for you to return, waiting for you to stop living on autopilot, waiting for you to wake up and remember your power. There comes a moment in life when everything begins to change. Not because the world gets easier, not because people become kinder, but because you change the way you see. And when your perception changes, your entire reality shifts. That moment comes when you stop blaming your past. You stop blaming your parents. You stop blaming your partners, your trauma, your circumstances. That moment comes when you decide to take full ownership of your mind, not to erase the past, but to stop being its prisoner. Carl Jung said, "Freedom is not found by denying the darkness, but by bringing it into the light." And that is exactly what you are doing right now. You are lighting a flame within yourself. You're no longer drifting through life on autopilot, repeating the same thoughts like invisible chains binding your spirit. Now, you're starting to think with intention, with awareness, with power. And here's something I need to tell you. Something perhaps no one has ever said to you clearly enough. You deserve to live in peace. Not that fake peace that depends on everything outside being perfect. I'm talking about the peace that grows from being at peace with yourself. The kind that comes from knowing you're doing your best, from recognizing that you're awakening, that you're no longer going to keep punishing yourself for what you weren't, or for what you didn't do perfectly. That peace is already yours. You don't need anyone's permission to claim it. From this moment on, every time a negative thought arises, don't treat it as an enemy. See it as an invitation, an opportunity to choose differently, to stop repeating the same story, to respond from your present self and not from the wounds of your past. Take a pause, breathe deeply, say silently to yourself, "I am more than my thoughts. I choose what to believe." Don't just say it, feel it. Let the words soak into every corner of your being. Engrave them in your mind as unshakable truths. This is your training. Each day is a chance to weaken the old narrative and to strengthen the new one. And there will come a day when your mind, the same mind that once sabotaged you, will become your ally. It will remind you of your power. It will push you forward with courage. It will protect you from falling back into self-doubt. And now comes a call to action you cannot ignore. Don't wait for tomorrow. Begin today. One small, different action today can open a whole new path for you. Maybe it's writing down your thoughts. Maybe it's having that conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's unfollowing people who fuel your insecurities. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you take action. Not out of fear, but because you deserve more. Because you've already suffered enough. Because you've already spent too long believing that you couldn't. Because inside, you lives a version of yourself that's been asleep, screaming to be awakened. You don't need to be perfect to begin. You just need to be willing to stop staying the same. And remember this, negative thoughts don't disappear overnight, but they do lose their grip every time you refuse to believe them. Every time you face them with a new truth. Every time you choose your peace over your mental habit, you are rewriting your story. And that is one of the bravest things anyone can do. We may be reaching the end of this message, but in truth, this is just the beginning of a new way of living with yourself. No longer from judgment or guilt, but from awareness, from truth, from the courage of knowing you are not your thoughts. Carl Jung gave us a powerful insight. The journey inward is the hardest of all, but also the most transformative, because it's not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you've always been, underneath the noise of the mind, underneath the fear, underneath the mask. You didn't come into this world to be imprisoned by your thoughts. You came here to express yourself, to create, to connect, to grow. And none of that can flourish if you keep believing every dark thought that visits you. So today, right here and now, let go of the need to have everything figured out. Let go of the pressure to please everyone. Let go of the unrealistic expectation to be perfect, and start walking with more lightness, more honesty, more peace. Negative thoughts won't vanish by magic, but they can be weakened every time you choose not to react. Every time you breathe instead of attack. Every time you observe instead of judge. Every time you transform "I can't" into "I'm willing to try." This path is long. There will be days when you stumble. Days when the old lies feel true again. But it doesn't matter how many times you fall. What matters is how many times you rise, with more awareness each time. And with every rise, if you choose to stand up, your shadow loses its strength, and you reclaim your light. Now, before we finish, I want to leave you with one final act of power. Close your eyes for a moment, breathe, and say silently within yourself, with strength and conviction, "Today, I choose not to be a slave to my mind. Today, I choose to think with love, with clarity, with purpose. Today, I kill the thought that steals my peace and plant the idea that reminds me of who I am." Repeat these words every time you feel yourself slipping, every time fear or self-criticism tries to take over. This declaration isn't just a phrase, it's a shield, a seed, a decision. And now, one last thing, and it's important. Share this message with someone who needs it. You have no idea how many people are silently trapped in their minds, not knowing how to escape. Be a light to others. Be a guide. Help others wake up the way you are waking up now. And if this message stirred something deep inside you, don't let it fade into forgetfulness. Save it. Revisit it. Live it. Because real transformation doesn't come from what you hear. It comes from what you choose to apply. Your transformation has already begun. And always remember, you are not your thoughts. You are so much more. Thanks for staying until the end. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss out on what's next. See you in the next video.